that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah,
and
also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly...
Yeah.
I mean, this is learning stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far-right.
But also, even if she were right-wing, which she isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you if you say that, will they? Because you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, and the unfashionable workplace.
Good morning, 9:30 on Thursday, the 14th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, another royal rift. Prince William and Harry are set to make an appearance to honour their mother, Princess Diana, tonight, but they're going to be doing it separately.
Extremism redefined. The government is setting out a new definition of extremism after a rise in hate crime against Jews and Muslims. Does it go far enough? Or some people say, does it go too far?
And Diane Abbott has accused both Conservatives and Labour of failing to tackle racism following remarks made to her from a major Tory donor. Does she have a point?
And the Halifax are set to impose a 70-year-old age limit on thousands of older mortgage borrowers. This means higher monthly payments for many. Is this smart business or unfair on older home buyers?
And arts for everyone, everywhere. We're all going to be painting, singing and acting our way through the day. This is going to be the message from Sir Keir Starmer this morning as he pledges to create more opportunities for working-class kids. And Kev's pick and mix on the market in Suffolk is over after 24 years because the local council want to give the market a bit of a sort of woke makeover, make it healthy.
Terrible.
Awful.
Terrible. What happened to tradition?
Quite.
And choice.
And the small working person wanting to make a living. You go to Tesco, get your pick and mix down the road. That's OK, apparently, but not OK for Kev. We're going to be talking about that. GBViews at gbnews.com. First, though, is the news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone, 9:36, and these are the latest headlines this morning. The government has outlined a new definition of extremism. That comes just 2 weeks after the Prime Minister warned of forces that he said were trying to tear us apart. It describes extremism as the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance. It's intended to be used to assess whether groups should be given a platform or receive public funding. Ministers say Britain is facing an increased threat of extremism following the Hamas attacks on Israel in October. However, church leaders, including the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, have warned that the definition could create more division. Fewer middle-aged people are dying from cancer than at any point in the last 25 years, though researchers are warning that cases are still on the rise. Deaths among 35 to 69-year-olds are down because of better screening and treatment and fewer people smoking. However, studies showing a concerning increase in cancer diagnosis, particularly in prostate and breast cancer. Experts say it's largely due to lifestyle factors like obesity and alcohol consumption. With better intervention, they say around 37,000 cases could be prevented over the next 16 or so years. And China's foreign ministry has criticised a plan in the US to force the owner of TikTok to sell the social media app. The bill, which passed bipartisan support yesterday, aims to address concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the algorithm that's behind the video app, which is used by some 170 million people in the US alone. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry says there's no fairness to speak of in citing national security as a reason to force the sale, while TikTok's CEO says it will reduce competition in the market. Those are the headlines for now. More to come in the next half hour. And in the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
A lot of royal news around because William and Harry are supposedly attending the same award ceremony. That's how it's been billed, but in fact they're not. It's all to do with their mother. William will make awards on the stage at the Science Museum, and then Harry will beam in from Montecito in California, but after his brother's gone. Isn't that pathetic?
It's extraordinary, isn't it? It shows what conflict there is. Even at a time like this, you think they might just, you
think they might
come on,
bury their differences for the sake of their mother.
Together.
Who
can't even be on the same room with one on a screen and one on a stage.
It really is bad, and actually their mother would be devastated.
She would be devastated. They need
Any
a
mum
strong
would
woman
be.
in their life to bang their heads together, as my mum would do. First of all, though, it is great to see some of the royal family attend the second day of Cheltenham Festival yesterday. It was, of course, traditionally Women's Day. Became Woke Wednesday, didn't it, Andrew, in your opinion? It became
Style Day.
Style Wednesday.
So there's Camilla, the Queen, with a very big hat. The papers are making much of the fact that on Style Day she was wearing an outfit she's worn before. Why shouldn't she?
Good. It's a green and a Valentine coat, apparently. She was wearing it with a vibrant floral scarf and a hat from Lock & Co.
Zara Phillips, who always looks fabulous.
Yeah, I love Zara Phillips. Met her many times. She is the most down-to-earth person you could possibly imagine.
She really is.
Princess Anne did a brilliant job in raising Zara Phillips to be normal, and her brother.
And the point was, they're Peter Phillips and Zara Phillips. They're not right on, they're not honourable, they're not Lord or Lady.
Yeah.
Mr and Miss.
So,
And that was
on.
also Princess Eugenie. That was Princess Eugenie, you missed it.
I have nothing. I've got nothing on Eugenie.
Prince Andrew's
I've got
daughter.
nothing.
She looked very nice in white.
I'm sure she's lovely. I bet she has a lovely life. Right, the government have announced their new definition of extremism.
So groups which incite hatred and undermine democracy will be named and changed as extremism. They're not going to. We don't know the names of the groups yet, but we're getting the new definition.
People that fall below the terrorism threshold but continue to promote violence, hatred or intolerance will be banned from working with any public body.
So this is all going to be announced by Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, but he was advising all of this by the former Labour MP and now the government's advisor on political violence and disruption, Lord Warney, who joins us now. Lord Warney, good morning to you. Why do we need this definition to be changed? And if you could explain in layman's terms, what's it been changed to and how will it affect people?
Good morning. I do think the progress being made by the government today on this is welcome, and what they are doing is actually narrowing down the existing focus on extremism, which had been broad to a level where it was actually quite difficult to sometimes to understand, certainly to interpret and enforce into meaningful action. So what this revised definition does is it focuses on the attempts by some groups, some individuals to systematically undermine our liberal democracy. So a kind of harm being perpetrated on the country, which is often below that violent terrorism threshold, but for which our security services have rightly had a focus on in recent decades, but nevertheless can do really significant harm in undermining the values that are central to us as a country, and so I'm welcoming the fact that we can be more active and proud of the fact that we are a parliamentary democracy, that we should seek to protect it. And what must flow from this is the really difficult work to, as you say, Andrew, to identify which groups are falling beyond the acceptable threshold in seeking to undermine democracy and removing funding and support from those groups.
I mean, look, it sounds incredibly well-intentioned, but at the moment, if you've got groups who are quite vocal about their dislike of other religions or even this country, we know who they are because they feel free to say that out loud. If they now know that you are policing what they say as opposed to what they do, they become much harder to identify. They're going to still be thinking these things, they're just not going to say them out loud.
Well, it's even more difficult and conceptually and in practice to police private thought, and no one is suggesting that. But where I think the harm can be done is by encouraging this sense, actually, that our encouraging in the sense that we should all be striving for systems that are in direct opposition to our parliamentary democracy. And I think if we can be more focused on saying that that is unacceptable, it may not be illegal, but we certainly shouldn't have a government public system that can actually end up pumping public money in various ways into supporting groups who are actually, at their heart, they want to dismantle the system that we are lucky enough to enjoy in the United Kingdom. So all of this is really difficult.
Cleverer. They'll just get cleverer. They know you're watching what they say now. If somebody is saying things which are against this country or against a religious group, those departments handing out that money should be sufficiently smart to not give them that money anyway. We don't need this legislation so that these groups become much cleverer at disguising how they feel, because now they know you're watching them. Now they know they could get in trouble for what they say. They're just not going to say it. We don't need this, do we? If people are doing their jobs properly, we don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the argument, but I mean, you could apply that really to any law. There is, I think, a point in having laws that can focus the mind on trying to help public institutions understand what is unacceptable behaviour, because I think there is often confusion. There can be confusion about where the boundaries ought to lie, and even if you know where you think the boundary ought to be, often when you are an individual organisation or grant-giving body, it can be difficult to understand whether this organisation is across the line or not. And so none of this will be perfect, but I think it can give a greater level of clarity about who we are as a country, what we stand for, the kind of and the bar that there ought to be engaging with mainstream institutions and being potentially in receipt of public money for doing so.
Is this just going to be guidance in the end, though, Lord Warney? Is it not? You're not actually going to take legislation through Parliament, are you?
I think that is the government's intention, and Michael Gove has been good enough to consult me on the definition. But this is, this is his and the government's prerogative. I think that that this needs to be more than guidance, in the sense that I think the framework needs to be robust. It needs to be well understood, and it needs to be able to be scrutinized and challenged in whatever the most appropriate way for that to do. Because obviously, if you are a group that is labeled as extreme, you're going to have something to say about that. Some of the organizations that are clearly worried they're going to end up on that category are already being very vocal about it. And
I'm worried I'm going to end up on that category. I'm worried I'm going to end up on that category. And let me tell you why. Because during the pandemic, when I spoke out against government policy, which we should be able to do in a liberal democracy, I was being surveilled by the government. My name is on those lists. I sent a tweet out raising awareness of data on the VAERS system about an increase in menstrual irregularities after the vaccine. That got me a black mark next to my name with this government. And in a similar pandemic situation, when everyone's panicking again and everybody's talking about individual liberties, when people like me are talking about individual liberties, and you're talking about what will keep people safe, I might be deemed to be dangerous to the public. How can you guarantee to me that that won't happen?
Well, I mean, on one level, I mean, Bev, you shouldn't be daft enough to fall for conspiracy theories.
No, this was VAERS. This was VAERS. This was on the government's own system.
But there's an important point.
How dare you? No, how dare you? Don't tell me that's a conspiracy theory, because that's data.
We're not going to turn this all into COVID again, are we?
No, but this is about free speech. This is about free speech. And if you can't guarantee me... Well, this because so much of that time was about free speech.
Forgive me for tweaking your tell. It is an important point. Let me answer the point. I think that it is really important that there remains a space for free speech, and I think it's understandable that we look at the recent pandemic and where the boundaries ought to lie, because there were a lot of conspiracy theories that were around about at the time, and I think that raises questions for broadcasting guidelines. But equally, there was a danger that you had a level of groupthink and you shut out things like was China responsible for the virus being produced, and that was jumped on early on, and the discussion around that was suppressed. So this is an important and difficult balance, and I think that is why the framework that is set out needs to be able to be properly scrutinised and challenged, because while you may or may not agree with the instincts of a current government or a current minister, we are always liable to change in a democracy.
Okay.
And you need the framework to be able to withhold a big change that could end up, in future potentially saying an organisation like GBNews falls foul of. We absolutely
exactly. We've got to go. Lord Walney, I think you and I need to have a cup of tea together and clear the air.
Shall I talk about COVID?
No, I won't. I talk about... It's not about COVID, it's about free speech. And if you're OK with it now, if this legislation comes in and Keir Starmer...
It's not legislation.
But he said he intends it to be.
No, it isn't. That's the point. It isn't going to be legislation. It's guidance.
Well, if it's guidance, still...
It isn't. It's
when
not
Keir
legislation.
Starmer
You misunderstand it.
When Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, you might feel differently.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. There were two. There were, in fact, 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
Well, 2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. We know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done, you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. Are you concerned by the definition of extremism being tweaked? Is it going to become something that we should all be a little bit frightened of? Please close through the Daily Express. Sam Lister is with us here. Sam, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to kind of read out. So the definition, it says it's the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance. And I think that is the concerning bit. And then it says that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others or undermine blah, 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 blah. So I think intolerance, to me, that is a very loose, woolly
and you see, where I worry about that, it could be, I would say, somebody who calls themselves a woman when
Yeah.
they're a man who's...
Yeah.
And if I call that out,
Yeah.
am I then going to be accused of intolerance
Absolutely.
under this guidance?
Yeah,
Now, that's my worry.
I think that's very worrying. I think Miriam Cates, the Conservative MP, she's been a big campaign. She's done a lot of work with the Daily Express on this issue.
A man might identify as a woman, but I defend my right to say you're still a bloke.
Exactly.
Now, is that intolerance?
Well,
100%.
Exactly, and that's the worrying bit, I think, about this, and it's not very clear. It's very woolly, it's very loose, it's very open to interpretation.
Yeah.
It is only guidance at the moment.
Yeah.
He
wasn't right, law. It's not legislation.
I think he's...
I don't think the government would get it through.
I mean, they wouldn't. They just wouldn't. Not in this
They haven't got
timescale.
time.
Yeah.
And it would get completely torn apart in the laws. And there's a lot of Tory MPs very concerned
about this because of the issues of free speech.
Yeah.
But then you also have to worry what does happen under a Labour government. They take this, they beef it up a little bit, and then where are we?
And if it's an authoritarian government...
Exactly. And also, so I just think there are big questions about it, but I also have a big problem with the fact that it's civil servants drawing up this list.
Yes.
And... You know, with the best will in the world, I'm not sure I would trust civil servants drawing up this list.
And if it's so important, we're getting the definition today.
Yeah.
Why are we not getting the groups that are going to be identified as extremists now? Why have we got to wait 2 more weeks?
Exactly.
What, they're still working on the list? What, they don't know?
Yeah. And there's some suggestions that there are groups in contention here. So Cage say they're a human rights advocacy group. Others say they are actually apologists for extremists, terrorists. They were obviously involved in the Jihadi John case, and they were effectively defending Jihadi John. So, you know, I think people would be quite pleased to see them on this list. But
and they'll sue the government, and they'll sue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There'll be legal action.
I think there's a whole minefield ahead.
But don't you think this is a fight the government want? Because they want people to think they're trying to crack down on extremists. Fine, good. But in the same process, they have to be so careful they're not shutting down genuine freedom of opinion and speech. I mean,
and dissidents. But you could just be a dissident against the government of the day.
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, this channel could be under threat if we all start moving towards this mindset that what you say is more important than what you do.
But also, I think just on if they want this fight, it's kind of a strange fight to pick because actually yesterday, because of this row with about the Tory donor and the racism row, I went to the briefing with Number 10 after PMQs, and it was dominated by questions of is Hester an extremist? Is he an extremist? Is he an extremist? Over and over and over again. So they've picked this fight, but actually it's slightly backfiring on them.
Yeah,
particularly this week.
Yeah.
Stay with us, Sam.
We've just stay there, Sam. Still to come, Sir Keir Starmer is setting out his plans to make art accessible to everyone.
It's grown and moaned.
Newsroom
so
on
not more
GBNews.
important.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners. And Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of oestrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Easy bit A. But And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences that I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Morning, it's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 14th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
So extremism going to be redefined. The government is setting out a new definition of extremism after a rise in hate crimes against Jewish people and Muslims. We're going to tell you exactly how it's changing.
And Royal Rift, Prince William and Harry are set to make an appearance to honour their mother, Princess Diana, tonight, but they'll be doing so separately. Cameron Walker has more.
Both princes committed to honouring the legacy of their late mother, but their continued feud threatens to overshadow the events tonight. More details shortly.
And 2 horses have died so far at Cheltenham Festival. Is it time to ban horse racing? We're going to have a debate on that very shortly.
And any moment now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is going to set out his plans to ensure that all children have access to the arts. I know that Andrew is very excited about hearing him speak.
I just want the maths book. Pothole hell. Can you believe this? Residents, including a 101-year-old lady, have been told by Somerset Council to fill the potholes in on their own road themselves. She's 101. Are you plagued by potholes where you live? I bet you are. That's what Keir Starmer should be talking about, potholes. Bread and butter issue for people watching this programme, listening to this programme, not the fact he's going to say every kid can learn music at school and play an instrument. Where they can get the money from?
You know what? I think a lot of parents are quite keen on the idea that their kids have access to music, but it does need funding, of course. And what lessons are you going to take them out of while you're teaching them the recorder?
Right.
gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. Keep your thoughts coming in to us this morning. First, they're the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 10 o'clock. The top story this morning. The government has outlined a new definition of extremism nearly 2 weeks after the Prime Minister warned of forces that he said were trying to tear the country apart. It describes extremism as the promotion or advancement of an ideology that's based on violence, hatred or intolerance. It's intended to be used to assess whether groups should be given a platform or receive funding. Ministers say Britain is facing an increased threat of extremism following the Hamas attacks on Israel in October. However, church leaders, including the Archbishop of Canterbury and of York, have warned that the definition could create more division. Well, Community Secretary Michael Gove told GB News this morning that it's not about silencing those with private or peaceful beliefs.
There is absolutely nothing in this definition or any of the actions that we're undertaking that curtails free speech. In fact, it's vitally important that all of us uphold free speech. Indeed, some of the people who are extremists want to close down free debate in order to advance their agenda. This definition is only about access to government money and to government platforms.
Health news, and fewer middle-aged people are dying from cancer than at any point in the last 25 years, though researchers are warning cases are still on the rise. Deaths among 35 to 69-year-olds are down because of better screening and treatment and fewer people smoking. However, studies show a concerning increase in cancer diagnosis, particularly in prostate and breast cancer. Experts say it's largely due to lifestyle factors like obesity and alcohol consumption. With better intervention, they say around 37,000 cases could be prevented over the next 16 years. China's foreign ministry has criticised a plan in the US to force the owner of TikTok to sell the social media app. The bill, which passed with bipartisan support yesterday, aims to address concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the algorithm that's behind the video app, which is used by some 170 million people in the US. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry has described the US plan as unfair, and TikTok CEO Xu Zichu says it will reduce competition.
This legislation, if signed into law, will lead to a ban of TikTok in the United States. Even the bill sponsors admit that that's their goal. This bill gives more power to a handful of other social media companies. It will also take billions of dollars out of the pockets of creators and small businesses. It will put more than 300,000 American jobs at risk, and it will take away your TikTok.
In other news, Diane Abbott has accused both major political parties of failing to tackle racism. Writing in the Guardian newspaper today, the independent MP has criticised the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, after she wasn't called to speak in Parliament yesterday, leaving Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to debate comments that were made about her. Ms Abbott's now warning the Conservatives will play the race card ruthlessly, she says, at the next general election. But she's also taken aim at her former party, Labour, describing Sir Keir Starmer's position as disappointing. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is still facing calls to return a £10 million donation that was made by the Conservatives' biggest donor, Frank Hester, after comments he made about Miss Abbott were widely seen to be racist. The Defence Secretary is urging Donald Trump not to cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the US presidential election in November. Speaking exclusively to GB News in Poland as he watched UK troops take part in a NATO exercise, Grant Shapps warned the former US president that it would be cheaper in the long term to back Ukraine. Britain has just announced a deal to buy 14 American military helicopters. Mr Shapps told GB News that more needs to be spent on defence.
Actually do have more money than ever before. Nonetheless, I think it is very important, given the pressures the world's under, that we make sure that our adversaries understand we're serious, and that does mean, I'm afraid, spending more money in Poland here than spending 4% of GDP on their defence.
And Jeremy Hunt has admitted that his plan to abolish national insurance won't be possible in the next parliamentary term. It follows his recent budget, which outlined a 2p reduction in contributions that will start in April, with a plan to streamline taxes by eventually eliminating national insurance altogether. But speaking at the Treasury Committee, the Chancellor conceded that removing the payments won't be done in the near future, but it does still remain his long-term aspiration. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. But now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
10:07, Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. We're going to be talking about this story a bit later about Kev's Pick and Mix, a market in Suffolk. It's been told it has to go. They're rebranding it as the Fresh Fair at Fromers Square. It's all got to be healthy food, so his Pick and Mix store's gone. Robert says our markets in Tameside have been decimated. The revamped market in Ashton-under-Lyne just isn't the same. Not many people go there. Before it was spruced up, it was really good. And Steve said, I remember my mum buying me a Pick and Mix in 1965. I still buy one occasionally, and I enjoy them while watching the Magic Roundabout on YouTube. Happy days. Long live Ken.
Long live Zebedee.
But this is, you know, you can taste a little sweet, like a Pick and Mix sweet.
Yeah,
it does bring back all those memories, doesn't it?
It's very sad.
And there we go. This is Kev's stall. That's his stall. And you can see why possibly the market say, I'm sorry, we need like fancy wooden...
They want it to be a bit more glamorous. But, hey, it's a market stall. And look at him. If you're listening on the radio, there he is with his flat cap on. his glasses, and he looks like a nice bloke.
That's Kevin Hillier, and that is his. He's been doing it for 24 years, selling his pick and mix. He did it all through COVID. He said he was dropping sweets off at people's doors so that they could just have a little treat, and now he's been taking his licence off him. It's outrageous.
What,
it's a petition to keep
They're
it.
going to get rid of florist stalls next, are they?
On Facebook.
Terrible.
Right, let's be joined now. Let's introduce our guest in the studio, Barrister Sam Fowles and political editor at the Daily Express, Sam Lister.
Let's talk to you about this definition of extremism. Beth and I are raising different points. So, as a Roman Catholic, I might say, too, I think abortion is a sin. I was brought up to think that. If I was to say that, Sam, that could fall foul, could it, potentially, of the definition of intolerance under this redefinition of extremism?
Yeah, potentially, yes. And that is the fundamental problem.
Yeah.
Is illustrated by the fact that we've been able to come up with so many things that could potentially fall within this definition. Obviously, the government isn't going to define everything like that as extremism. But it means you've got unaccountable civil servants and potentially unaccountable ministers who can decide what happens to be extremism and what isn't. And that is a recipe for injustice. And we saw this sort of problem happening, for example, at the Clapham Common vigil for Sarah Everard, that I was involved in the inquiry into that, when the police were given such a broad description of what sort of protest could be banned, that they essentially had to exercise discretion to decide which ones can be banned within that big description, and they got it wrong on Clapham Common.
Yeah.
This is the same thing with extremism. It means that essentially politicians and civil servants can pick the people they don't like and label them extremists.
Yeah. Sam, this isn't going down universally well on the Tory benches either. Because when I talked to some about it this week, and they're very anxious about it.
People are concerned because it is one of those areas where does this creep? You know, what is the creep effect? What is the mission creep on this? You know, you start off with the best of intentions, but then other things kind of knock on from that, and they are concerned about that. Particularly, as I say, Conservative MPs who are concerned about freedom of speech, particular issues, those on the right of the party, particularly those on the religious right, because they fear, like you say, Andrew, that certain issues could become deemed intolerant. Yeah.
It's amazing, Sam. It's funny because the papers, like the front page of Telegraph today, is saying go to identify Muslim groups as extremists. That plays very well to a certain part of the electorate. But we need to use our imagination. It's not just extremists, is it? It could be legitimate media outlets, independent journalists also on YouTube, etc., who suddenly, because their views don't fit the government of the day, are quashed and silenced.
Absolutely, and this has always been the problem with extremism. Extremism is a word that people in power use for the opinions of those they don't like. So famous extremists include Gandhi, suffrage campaigners, gay rights campaigners. All of these people have been described as extremists.
Peter Thatcher was an extremist in his day when he was part of a gay rights group called Outrage.
Yeah.
Deliberately triggered outrage to try and get publicity for his cause.
Absolutely, and
now he's a national treasure.
Absolutely, and that's why it's this whole approach is so problematic, right? Because we're analysing this as if it's a really serious piece of policy, but let's remember it's also a piece of politics. This is about ironically creating division, making people scared, making people worried, and I think the actual impact of this will be that it increases the risk of extremism, because when you ban people, when you exclude people, when you silence people, that drives them into the arms of the real extremists and the people that genuinely are talking about violence, talking about creating a real threat to democracy.
The point I was also trying to make, Sam, to Lord Walney earlier is that when you silence people, you don't know what they're thinking. I want to know if I'm in a room of racists or if I'm in a room of religious extremists. And this, all it does, it's just pure politicking, and I think that makes it worse. It's just policing what people are saying and thinking rather than the actions. Why do those people who've got these funds, and Lord Walney's justification was, there is money going to these extreme groups and we need to know who they are. We need to give people the knowledge in order to not hand over that money. Why do they need that knowledge? Can't they use their common sense? Can't they work out if an organisation doesn't have this country's best interests at heart?
Well, the fact is they don't need that extra definition. And in fact, it was really instructive that Michael Gove was was interviewed today, and he was asked to give an example of someone that would be caught by this definition and justify it. And he gave an example of someone who was found by a court to be extremist under the existing law. So there's not been any sort of case presented about why we need to change this, except for these sort of vague and scary insinuations about people mainly targeted against people who are protesting against what's going on in Gaza. And the fact that you can describe these people as extremists when they are essentially in line with what the International Court of Justice has said, and has said this is an incredibly worrying situation, we want people to be worried about this. The people that are protesting aren't extremists. In fact, if you're not protesting, you've got to really ask why.
I would disagree with that strongly, but there you go. I mean, I think in defence of this, the one thing I would say is actually many people, most people, I would argue, certainly Daily Express readers, are not happy to see their money, their taxpayers' money, going to fund groups who support extremist protests. And I think the Gaza protests, although largely are peaceful, we do know that there have been extremists on those, and there are very visibly extremists on those
and not
marches.
called out by the police.
Not called out by the police. The police stand by, let these people continue. Most people don't want to see their money going towards funding groups linked to these people. And so I think that is the important bit here. It's about stopping the government, stopping the councils, giving our money to groups that are tangentially linked to extremists.
Let's talk a bit about racism. Diane Abbott, we know she's been in the eye of this storm after the Tory donor, the Tories aren't going to give the money back, they haven't got $10 million to give back, frankly, Frank Kester. But she's done a really interesting piece in The Independent today saying, actually, it's not just the racism in the Tory party she's subject to, from within the Labour Party as well, Sam. A report done a couple of years ago by a lawyer, the Ford report, talking about how she'd been subjected to hideous abuse from within her own side because of her support for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, and I think this is goes to the heart of it, doesn't it? Because when you see political parties attacking each other on these kind of issues, what you find is often that the attacker has as many problems in their own backyard as the group they're attacking. So I think clearly Diane Abbott speaks from great experience. I mean, we know that she is the most abused MP in Parliament. She was the first black woman to be elected, and what came with that was a torrent of abuse for the last 25 years. So she really has been a sufferer of long-term abuse, and in a way that no other MP has.
I think we'll stay with us, pair of Sams. We're going to cross live now to Central London West.
Can't wait for this.
Laying out his vision to make sure the arts are available to everyone, everywhere. Here he is.
Be here today. And there are a lot of people that we need to thank for making all of this possible. Bank of America and Bloomberg Philanthropies for their support for today's event, but more importantly, their long-standing support for the arts. And thanks to the Guildhall, of course, as well, to Jonathan and Emily for welcoming us to this wonderful venue. It's been quite a while since I was last here. In fact, if I remember rightly, I was with long hair and flared jeans when I was last here. But for 6 years of my life, I came here every single week, every Saturday, starting when I was 11 years old. I would set off from my village of Hurst Green on the train to London Victoria with my flute under my arm to spend the day here as part of the Junior Exhibitioners programme. Don't worry, I can see. I haven't got my flute with me today. I'm not going to subject you to that. But actually listening to that incredible performance just now that we just heard reminded me of the thrill of playing myself at the festival hall. Because the opportunities that music gave me, my first ever trip abroad was to Malta with the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra. And so you will know that excitement you feel when you have an encounter with the arts that changes your life. Everyone in the room will know that feeling. The sense, I suppose, of being drawn into something that seems bigger than ourselves, of being truly moved by a piece of music, a painting, or a play, or losing yourself and finding something new in the space that art creates. These encounters with art and culture change us forever. And they certainly changed me forever. And when I left my little village of her screen and went to the city of Leeds to go to university, I discovered a whole new world of indie bands, Orange Juice, Wedding Present, back then with a guitar that was lent by my good friend John.
Well, that's thrilling, isn't it? That's going to get them. That's going to get them really jumping up and down with excitement behind the red wall, Sam. Don't you think?
Well, I think, you know, to be fair, I think I actually benefited from learning the violin at my comprehensive school, and it was something that did open up some doors to me. So I'm very pro.
You still play it?
I do actually.
Do you?
Occasionally, and during COVID, I was particularly involved in a group when we went out and played in the open air. So, there you go. So you're making me blush now. Anyway, so I think it is important to give working class kids the opportunity to play instruments. I think that is actually important because culture is for everybody, and it shouldn't just be for people at fee-paying schools. But whether this is going to ignite excitement at the ballot box is a different matter.
I still think people want to get we want to know how he's going to find the 100,000 kids that have disappeared from the school system. That's really important.
Yeah, that is true, actually. And it's a really big problem.
It is.
It's
and
a
raising
really big
standards
problem.
in reading, writing, arithmetic, rather than talk about music. Look, it's very worthy, isn't it, Sam? Obviously, Sam's right. It's good that kids would get access, but is that what people are really thinking about when their kids go into school? They're worried about standards, not enough teachers, can't afford school books, let alone buying a recorder.
Yeah, I think, you know, saying, is this going to get people excited? This is the first time, actually, that I've been quite excited about a Keir Starmer government, is hearing this policy. You're absolutely right. People are going to be worried about the number of teachers, they're worried about investment in schools. That has got to be priority number one. But the arts is great for the economy. £2 spent on every £1 spent on arts generates £2 for the economy. It makes us smarter because it develops critical thinking and creativity, and it makes us more competent. I learned 1,000 times more from my drama GCSE, and yes, I did. I'm very happy with it. 1,000 times more from my drama GCSE than my maths GCSE that I use in practice as a barrister.
Are you more of an actor or a producer?
I think we know you're an actor, Sam. He's a barrister.
Hence why he's a barrister.
All barristers are failed actors. Keir Starmer can promise all the musical instruments in the world, but unless he does something about smartphones for kids, no one will go home and practice anything. Half the kids don't want to play or practice anything now, so, you know, concern yourself with that. Right, still to come, we're going to have more on this David versus Goliath battle. It's all about the pick-mix stall. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed foods? Boris Johnson is calling on the government to do this. In his Daily Mail column, the former Prime Minister says that people don't know what they're feeding their families and there's too many extra ingredients. That's why I'm asking, should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed food? Well, joining me now to discuss, Steve Miller, former presenter of Fat Families, Helena Davidson, campaigner and policy expert at the Vegan Society. Right, so I'm going to start with you. Steve Miller, what do you think?
Oh, I'm applauding Boris today. Good on you, mate. And the reason for that is we know that the research on the warnings on cigarettes, I should say, when those warnings were visual, they worked very well. The second reason on a practical level is that we need to stop looking and listening before we start, grazing and putting things in the trolley. And the third thing is that, these kind of signs, or these warnings, I should say, are kind of hypnotic. They trigger the emotion. So they're much more likely to get people to think and maybe resist.
Yeah, so at the Vegan Society, we're broadly in favour of increasing consumer knowledge when it comes to the nutritional value of people's food. But I think it's important to mention that ultra-processed food isn't an issue that's exclusive to vegans. And whilst most meat alternatives will fall into the ultra-processed food category, it largely depends on how we're going to look at how UPFs are going to be assessed, because vegan alternatives that fall under ultra-processed foods, they're actually, on average, healthier than meat products or ultra-processed foods that contain animal products. Really? So I think it depends on how we look at it. We might have to take a closer look at the nutritional profile of individual foods rather than the level of processing.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:23. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce. What are you doing?
I'm looking for Diane Abbott writing about racism.
Just checking he knew we were on the telly.
No, I do.
We've got in the studio now.
And the radio.
And on the radio. Broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone.
Hello.
And political commentator Jonathan Liss in studio. Can you help me keep him under control?
Do you know what, Bev, when you were off last week, he did this all the way through the show, and I just said to him at one point, I'm not good enough to do this by myself, so could you stop doing your other work?
I've got to find, because she's written Diane Abbott has written a very important article today, but we're going to talk about Pick and Mix first.
Right.
Oh, what are we talking about Pick and Mix first?
Lovely to have you, Jonathan. I've not met you before, so this is very exciting for me. Right, this story is a classic David versus Goliath. It is the big corporation down the road. Tesco can sell Pick and Mix, and this poor market trader has now been told he has to go. Why?
So this is... I'm, unlike some people or are stereotyped on the left, I actually am not in favour of a nanny state at all, and I don't like banning things generally. I don't like criminalising. I don't like criminalising things. I think that all drugs should be legal, for example. Oh. And I think that people should have the choice.
Well, I've gone right off you now, we have.
People should have the choice to do things and to put things in their body, even if they're only harming themselves, if that's their choice, they'd have free and informed consent to do so. So I don't object to people eating Pick and Mix if that's what they want to do. I think that people should be educated about the dangers of that food, and obviously we have an obesity crisis, etc. But fundamentally, people should have the right to buy it and to sell it.
But this isn't about health. This is about trying to make it look posher.
OK, but this is about... So what Saxman Town Council is saying is that this market is at risk of closure. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what they're saying. So if we take it at face value, they're saying the market is at risk of closure and we need to revamp it so we can save it, and that's why we think that people want fresh fare, so we're going to call it fresh fare. And if you're going to have a market called Fresh Fare at Froma Square, then it is quite difficult to have Pick and Mix there, let's be honest.
Do you know what this is to me of? This is a town council who was trying to make, A, more money off the market, and B, trying to make it look posher, which will freeze out the people of that town who won't be able to afford it. You know, all of these market towns, people go for a very good reason, because all the produce is much cheaper. Fruit and veg is much cheaper, all that stuff. This is a snottery and a snobbery on the part of this council. And to drive an old guy out of business. You know, Pick and Mix is a joy for kids. It's a total delight. It was the most exciting part of my youth, hence the fact I was 4 stones overweight, because I ate a lot of them. So this, to me, is just trying to push it up. They will charge the people who are going to have their stall and their goods. They'll charge them more money to rent the stall. Right. People like this old guy are not going to be able to afford it. Yeah. And it'll make them as a council look posher, but it will actually punish the people in the town.
And they're doing, I think you're absolutely right, and they're doing it, though, under the auspices of healthy eating. Yeah. They're using that virtue signalling. You must all look after your health. We want fresh food at Froma Square. And I really hate it, Jonathan, when people are using this kind of... I know what's best for you. We the council, know what's best for your health, and therefore we're going to give you some very expensive organic carrots instead of Pick and Mix.
I mean, obviously, there's a health side to this story and there's a trade side to the story. And, you know, as Conservatives, I might expect you to be in favour of free trade.
There's only a health side if you believe the PR guff from the council.
I'm not here to represent any town council.
This is the worst sort of elitism. They want this. They don't think it looks right. It doesn't send out the right image, and they've got all their alliteration, haven't they? Fresh food at whatever it's called.
Do you know, I live in an area where
Square.
every Saturday they have a fair, a food fair. It is outrageously expensive. For a bit of cheese in this place, you pay 3 times the price you pay in Tesco, and that really...
Which is ironic, because the whole point of markets originally was meant to, they're meant to be cheaper. They're meant to be sort of the home-sourced food, and obviously supermarkets are being more expensive. So I agree with that for sure.
And we are hoping at some point to get to talk to the guy who's been...
I hope so.
Well, listen, there's a right of reply. Saxmundham Council. So basically, Kev's daughter set up a Facebook page raising awareness of the fact that her father was going to lose his business. They've had thousands of signatures on a petition. So the council has today defended its actions. They've said the social media response has been genuinely unexpected. I bet it was. And we are taking on board the comments we are receiving. We sincerely wish that everyone who's engaged with this debate online would come out and regularly support their local market. Well, that's a good point. Despite the success we've received for the monthly Saturday markets, this has not carried over to Wednesdays, which is when Kev is on. We are not well supported by the public. We firmly believe we must act now to save our weekly market, and that a focus on fresh produce will draw in more weekday shoppers.
Well, I hope people go in droves to support him.
So do I.
In droves.
I think I might make the trip.
Right, Diane Abbott, Jonathan. So she is now saying, actually, it's not just the Conservative donor who's been racist. I have racism from all angles, including the Labour Party, she says in today's Independent.
Right, so I was just told about 2 minutes ago that we were talking about this, so I was just trying to read the article that she wrote in The Guardian. Didn't quite get through to the end of it, but having not having read it, I do think it's fair to say that racism is not just a one-party issue. I think that's fair. I think it sort of manifests itself in different ways. But I think that everyone should be alive to the risks of racism, the dangers of racism, and that the way that we speak. There's unconscious racism sometimes as well. People don't necessarily know the effect that they have on other people when they speak. I think it's quite sensible to talk about that, particularly when you are a woman who's received so much abuse over the years. But I think what we have to sort of isolate that from the comments that Frank Hester made, which anybody would be able to identify as racist. And I think it is really to the abiding shame of the Conservative Party that they spent an entire day denying those comments were racist before Kenny Badenoch had to shame them into saying.
Before you move on to that, go back to it, because we've discussed Frank Hester to Hellenbach, but go back to the thing you said about everyone has to be aware of the racist comments they make. Do you imagine that Diane Abbott is aware of the racist comments that she has constantly made over the years? The one where she said West Indian women make better mothers than white women. The one where she said taxi drivers are racist. The one that she was currently under suspension from the Labour Party
she still is suspended.
where she actually said Jewish people do not suffer racism, they only suffer prejudice in the way that travellers and in the way Irish people do. What an outrageous thing to say. No, let me finish. What a lack of understanding of what racism is all about, because Diane Abbott thinks racism only goes one way. She thinks it's only white on black. She doesn't get it. It can be the other way round. And she doesn't... And she stood up... She tried to speak in the Commons
40 times.
40 times she stood up to speak, and thank goodness Lindsay Hoyle stopped her, because she would be talking about the racism comments on her. She is under suspension from the Labour Party because of racist comments.
But Carol, we're not here to talk about what Diane Abbott
yes,
might
we
have said
are.
in the past. No, because you have to...
Not in the past, this is current. Jonathan, this is current.
A couple of weeks ago. It was she was suspended.
Obviously, and I was one of the first people to condemn that. I'm not defending Diane Abbott's previous comments. I think what I'm saying is that we can separate things out. Two things can be true at the same time. Someone might have said things which are offensive, and they might also be the victim of racism.
Do you not think it's a bit
about one of those things.
Do you not think there's a hypocrisy involved in her talking about racism when, in fact, she has inflicted racism on other people herself? How do the Jewish people feel, the people that she has said don't suffer racism?
Well, I'm Jewish myself, and I think it's terrible when someone says that that a woman makes them want to shoot, that hate all black women, but that she should be shot.
It's terrible?
I'm offended by that. It doesn't matter.
Are you
what
not
she
offended
said,
by what's been happening on these marches where, kill Jews? You're not offended by that?
Well, don't put words in my mouth, Carol.
I'm not asking you.
Of course, well, obviously, I, like any sensible person, would be offended by a call to kill any group or any individual for that matter. Of course that's not. So it's not a kind of gotcha. Of course that's wrong. No one is denying that there is a minority of opinion in those and a minority of slogans, placards, etc., which are completely unacceptable. No one is denying that. What is at issue in the marches is whether they can be characterised as hate marches. I completely reject that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what this donor said 5 years ago. That is the kind, and whether the Conservative Party return the money that he gave them.
But I do think it's interesting that she has, in this article today in The Guardian, has said she has been subjected to wicked racism from within the Labour Party.
We have to move on. I'm so sorry. We've got Sam Francis who's waiting very patiently in the newsroom. We're late for him. All I would say is look at the front benches if you think politics is racist. It is not. Right, time for your morning's news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. It's just gone 10:30 and we start with some breaking news coming out of the Old Bailey this morning. You may remember the case of schoolgirl Eliane Andam. She was 15 when she was murdered in South London. Well, this morning a boy has denied her murder. The 17-year-old suspect, who can't be identified because of his age, pleaded not guilty to murder in court. Instead, he admitted manslaughter. Eliane's attacker was wearing gloves and a mask while he stabbed her when she was on her way to school while meeting two friends in South London last year. He used a large knife, according to reports. His plea was not accepted by prosecutors, and a trial will now take place from November the 25th. The government has outlined a new definition of extremism nearly 2 weeks after the Prime Minister warned of forces that he said were trying to tear the country apart. It's intended to be used to assess whether groups should be given a platform or receive funding. Ministers say Britain is facing an increased threat of extremism following the Hamas attacks on Israel in October. However, church leaders, including the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, have warned that the definition could create more division. Diane Abbott has accused both major political parties of failing to tackle racism. Writing in The Guardian today, the Independent MP criticised the Commons Speaker after she wasn't called to speak in Parliament yesterday. It left Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to debate in the Commons about the comments that were made about her. It's after the Prime Minister faced calls to return a £10 million donation made by the Conservatives' biggest donor, Frank Hester, after comments he made about Miss Abbott were widely seen to be racist. And finally, some royal news. The Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex are set to attend an awards ceremony in honour of their late mother, Princess Diana. Prince William will make an appearance in person at the Diana Legacy Awards later this evening. However, it's reported the brothers won't cross paths, with Prince Harry joining via video call only after William has left the ceremony. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, has been crowned Britain's favourite royal in a survey conducted before the recent photo editing controversy. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2815 and €1.1718. The price of gold is £1,693.13 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,771 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, is it time to ban horse racing? Well, 2 horses have died at Cheltenham Festival so far this year. But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we're looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
Today we are at Middlesex Aerospace in Basingstoke, and I'm joined by Lawrence Fold, the owner of the business. And I want to find out, Lawrence, why engineering is so important to the UK.
Well, engineering, and aerospace engineering in particular,
produces a whole series of very well-paid, interesting jobs. The products that were all made in this factory, ultimately speaking, pretty much all go abroad, even though they're integrated into systems in this country, but they'll wind up in Airbus, Boeing and other major aircraft facilities around the world. So exporting is really important.
Are we becoming competitive globally?
We remain competitive globally. Just because areas have got cheap labour, it doesn't mean that they're very good at producing sophisticated components. And it's that we do here, is produce technology at the very high end of manufacturing.
And how are we addressing the skills gap, and how important is this?
We've had our own apprenticeship programme every year since 1950, so we continue to train here, train our own apprentices, and build up the skills of our own people. That's been really key to our success over the years, and as a national thing, training and education for all of our people is very important. I mean, it's very much a truth to say that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Household energy bills will fall by £238 per year. Good news. An average of £20 a month. That's as Ofgem unveils its new energy price cap. So joining us in the studio is GBNews economics and business editor Liam Halligan.
The Ofgem energy price cap, that's the regulated amount that energy suppliers are allowed to charge, will fall from £1,928 a year to £1,690. That's from April the 1st. That's a drop of about 12%. That should save the typical household 20 quid a month. Prices are cheaper than they were, but they're still very elevated by historic standards. Certainly if you're an American household, a French household, even a Spanish or an Italian household, you're paying a lot less for your electricity and your energy in general than you are here in the UK. The energy companies have been a bit tricksy with the government because while they are lowering the energy price cap and the headlines are, well, your energy bills are coming down, blah, 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 the energy providers have actually chiselled out from Ofgem the permission to charge households an extra £2.33 a month on average. And the energy companies say that is money which they need, the energy companies, in order to support households who have got big debts on their energy bills. I don't know about you, but whenever I talk to people down the pub about energy bills, many of them say, well, the energy company's got like £2,000 of my money and it won't give it back to me. What's going on here? So there are lots of concerns about customer balances with energy companies, and it's also worth saying that as part of this announcement, the bit that no one will notice is that the energy companies are being able to charge all households to try and flatter the energy companies' balance sheets, which to me, on first reading, seems a bit odd.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only News channel.
(10:41). You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, we've got a few of your views here this morning. Let's have a look at what you've been saying. A few of you actually taking issue with this idea that Keir Starmer will be making everybody arts and all the children at school.
Music for everybody.
It's sort of like the Sound of Music vision is what he's selling to the nation. And a few people saying, actually, what is he going to... what about the children that don't want to play musical instruments? What do they do?
There'll be a lot of them.
Be a lot of them.
People who don't want to even go to music lessons.
What a waste of money.
Yeah.
Now, it's the third day of Cheltenham Festival and already 2 horses have died.
It's estimated 76 have died at Cheltenham since 2000, so there are people saying it's time to ban it. Well, joining us now is a representative from the animal welfare charity Peter Reuben Skeets and racing commentator Richard Hoyles. Reuben, to you first. Do you think it should be banned?
Well, thank you for having me on. Well, horse racing is a shameful and deadly spectacle. Horses race literally to their death just so that a jockey or trainer can collect some prize money or so someone else can get some fleeting excitement from placing a bet. These horses, 76, as you say, have died since 2000. 2 died just this week. Countless others get injured. These horses are dying for nothing more than our entertainment, and it has to stop now.
Richard, if you'd like to respond to that as a horse racing commentator.
Yeah, of course. And welcome, Reuben. We very much enjoy the right to debate. Those numbers do need to be put into context. You mentioned the 76. There have been 30,000 horses that have run at the Cheltenham Festival, or at Cheltenham since that period. The fatality rate is 0.4%. So 99.6% of horses come back perfectly healthy. And I think the thing that racing people really just find hard to get across is we love horses too. They are equine athletes. It is extremely important that they are cared for beautifully from cradle right the way through to their passing. And part of that is within the racing industry. And, it is fundamental that welfare is the centre of racing going forward. In the old days, horses were part of society. These days, people in urban areas don't see horses. They don't see racing. They don't appreciate that many, many people, irrespective of betting, get a lot of benefit from working with these animals and producing them to do their best. So I do understand the concerns. Racing needs to be completely transparent, but to suggest they just run around a field for someone's private entertainment is quite a long way from them.
Reuben, if you look at those pictures of Cheltenham Festival, thousands of people enjoying the spectacle, a huge amount of money made for the area and for all of the industries which are associated with horse racing. And as you've just heard there, the fatality rate of the horses is absolutely tiny. It would be ridiculous, wouldn't it, to ban this incredible event, all of these events, for the sake of a tiny number of horses who very sadly lose their lives.
Obviously, you bring up that statistic, but even one horse dying because people find it entertaining or because we make some money for it is one horse too many. And we know that across the year, 200 horses die in horse racing in the UK, not to mention the thousands that the racing industry sends to slaughter every single year, which obviously aren't included in that statistic.
Can I just get that straight back with that? Because 90,000, there are 90,000 racehorse appearances, and this myth that hundreds of racehorses end up in abattoirs was completely incorrect. Racing's made great strides through passporting and microchipping to ensure now that we can trace horses right the way through. And these numbers are banded around. There were 82 horses that came from GBN that ended up within abattoirs. Only one of those came from a racing background. I do understand Reuben's concerns, but this racing has to sign out all racehorses from the food chain, and this myth about them being taken to abattoirs as soon as their racing career is over is just not fair. Target us with other stuff, but that is just completely unfair, Reuben. Just going to ask you a question, Reuben. So I just understand whether or not, Reuben, you're in favour of horses as a whole being ridden. I'm just trying to understand sort of Peter's concept on this. Are you in favour of horses, being ridden, or do you feel that's not right?
Look, we're here to talk about horses that are being raced. They're being, forced to take jumps. Breeders are churning out these horses to produce a winner. Not every single one of them is going to be fast enough. And so, 12,000 horses are bred into Britain and Ireland every single year. Only about 40% of those go on to race. So you're now left with 60% of that 12,000 facing an uncertain fate. We do know that some are sent to slaughter. We do know that many face neglect, if they don't go on to race. And then, we only need to look at the horse rescue centres, which are absolutely flooded with horses dumped on them by the industry, to see the scale of neglect here.
It's a good question, though, isn't it, Reuben? Whether you do just disapprove of horses being ridden, full stop. Just answer the question. I think it's a fair one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, horses aren't just, playthings that are here for us to use. Naturally, they would live in large herds, roaming across large spaces, making their own decisions. But for the racing industry, when they're not racing, they often spend hours on end in isolation. If they're exploited for breeding, they may spend years on end in isolation. There's nothing funny about that.
In large herds making their own decisions. OK, so this large herd can just cross a road then, cross a busy motorway. I mean, these horses are brought up in fantastic conditions. I've been to some of these stables. They live their life of luxury.
Very well loved.
And they're very well loved. And they've got companionship, not just the staff who look after them, but their fellow horses. Richard, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point for us that are involved in the industry. We're being painted as sort of people who absolutely detest horses, whereas exactly the opposite is true. It provides employment for people who find it much more comfortable to be in a country environment, working with animals. So in a way, we're on the same page as Ruben, and racing has welfare right at its core. It's so important in order to get the social licence for the sport to continue. So in some ways, very similar, but we just are not in agreement that horses shouldn't be ridden or that they're forced to do anything. Anyone who does ride knows that you can't really force a horse to do something that it wants to, and it's capable of making its own decisions, whether it's being in a herd or whether it's actually being ridden by a human.
They want to take their own decisions.
Thank you. We really, well, thank you so much, both. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you both.
That was Richard Holmes, racing commentator, and Ruben Skeets from Peter. I do think that was a pretty extraordinary statement.
I'm sorry. That was terribly impolite, but the idea that horses should be free to make their own decisions, whereas we can't.
I know.
I'm sorry. Up next, Prince and Harry pay tribute to their mum tonight. They won't be in the same room together. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest weather for GB News from the Met Office. More rain to come as we go through today, but at least it is going to be pretty mild before a showery day for tomorrow. Like I said though, plenty of rain around today, a band pushing its way northwards into parts of Scotland, across Northern Ireland, and some of that rain could turn heavy, even a little bit of winteriness, some sleet or snow over the highest ground. Across more eastern parts of England, it's actually going to be largely fine, some decent sunshine through much of the day, but cloud and outbreaks of showery rain feeding up from the southwest on some brisk, blustery winds. Like I said, though, on the mild side, temperatures are well above average for the time of year for most of us, though a little bit chillier towards the north. More rain to come as we go through the end of the day, particularly across parts of Scotland, but it does start to push away as we go into tomorrow. There will be some clear skies around tonight, but also further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could really pack a punch. There could be the occasional downpour. Temperatures, though, not dropping a huge amount because of the blustery winds and the generally mild theme to things, many places staying in double figures overnight. As we go through Friday itself, then a largely showery and blustery day for many of us. Watch out as some of those showers could be heavy, possibly even thundery, particularly towards the south and southeast of the UK. Signs of something a little bit drier pushing in from the west, but for many it is going to be a largely showery picture. Temperatures still well above average for the time of year, so highs of around 16, possibly 17 Celsius. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, any doubts whether the rift between Prince Harry and Prince William continues will disappear tonight because they are both paying tribute to their mother, but they won't be sharing the same stage, and they won't even be together virtually.
That's right. Harry, of course, lives in California. He's going to be making an appearance by video. So joining us in the studio to explain more is our royal commentator, Cameron Walker. So was this billed, Cameron, as the two brothers honouring their mother? And it hasn't turned out like that.
Well, this is absolutely extraordinary. This is the 25th anniversary of the Diana Legacy Awards. I think the last time they appeared happily together, William and Harry, was 2017. I believe we've got some photographs of that looking pretty happy. But ever since then, either Harry's been in California or they have not appeared together. So this year, unfortunately, is no different, and it's just highlighting that rift between the two of them. Prince William being there in person, delivering the speech
at the Science Museum.
At the Science Museum tonight, presenting the awards. And then Prince Harry not appearing until William has left the building. So Harry is being virtually on the video
that is
call.
disrespectful to their mother.
Isn't it?
I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people this morning will be asking what would Princess Diana think of the two sons continuing to feud.
She'd be heartbroken.
I think perhaps
she's a mum.
Yeah,
and the boys were so close, brought even closer, of course, after the death of their mother. I mean, we know it's all broken down since Meghan, but you'd have thought they could put on a show.
I think what this does show is that both William and Harry, their mother's legacy have really rubbed off on them. So the whole awards is promoting Diana's belief that young people have the power to change the world for the better. And Harry and William, although they're not appearing together, they are still both determined to take part in some way. But the problem is, whoever's fault it is for this happening, it's completely overshadowing from the whole point of the awards and Diana's legacy, because all people are talking about, as you say, Andrew, is the feud between the two brothers.
Yeah. They need their heads knocked together, although it's very difficult if one's in Montecito and one's in Windsor.
I'm sort of thinking about the royal family, and they need a strong woman, don't they, in their life to get them together, to clear the air. It's often the matriarchs in the family that will sit them down at a time like this.
I think more and more now we're feeling more and more the absence of the late Queen, who ruled with wisdom, but she was also tough. We know that. And she was very good at enabling and bringing together. And I mean, it's just, how would she feel?
Well, I think that William and Harry both had great respect for the late Queen and would listen to her advice. I think when it comes to the next generation, because of the history of the relationship between William and his father and Harry and his father, perhaps is not as... Well, there's certainly a strong bond, but in terms of listening to advice, I think they're very much on their own paths at the moment. And Prince William, I think, in particular, he knows he's future king. He clearly has his way of doing things, and he's not going to be dictated to with what he's going to do.
It's about compromise. It shouldn't be about compromise.
And we have to compromise now by saying goodbye to Cameron just for now. Don't go anywhere. If you're middle-aged, looking to buying a house, bad news.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the south east, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. May have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, has warned name and shame extremist groups, all to do with the redefinition of extremism. We'll bring you that as soon as it happens. You're live with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Thursday, the 14th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So the government has set out a new definition of extremism after a rise in hate crimes against Jews and Muslims. Michael Gove MP will set out the list of extremist groups live at 11:30.
And the Halifax is set to impose a 70-year-old age limit on thousands of older mortgage borrowers. This means higher monthly payments for many. Smart business or unfair, particularly on middle-aged home buyers.
And Prince William and Harry are set to make an appearance to honour their mother, Princess Diana, tonight, but they will do so separately.
Pothole hell. Residents, including one lady who is 101, say Somerset councillors told them to fill in their own potholes on their roads. Are you plagued by potholes where you live? She was interviewed by Jacob Rees-Mogg last night, and
yes.
Terrific. And she's 101, her husband's 90, very happily married, but a bit too old, I think, to fill in potholes themselves.
Absolutely. And frankly, should we be filling in our own potholes when we're paying our taxes so that our councils can do the work for us? It feels like a very low bar.
These are bread and butter issues that ministers and politicians should be talking about.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the... Good morning. It says good afternoon. It's definitely the morning, and it's just gone 11 o'clock. Leading the news this morning, the government has outlined a new definition of extremism nearly 2 weeks after the Prime Minister warned of forces that he says were trying to tear us apart. It describes extremism as the promotion or advancement of an ideology that's based on violence, hatred or intolerance. It's intended to be used to assess whether groups should be given a platform or receive funding. Ministers say Britain is facing an increased threat of extremism following the Hamas attacks on Israel in October. However, church leaders, including the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, have warned that the definition could create more division. Community Secretary Michael Gove told GB News this morning that it's not about silencing those with private and peaceful beliefs.
Absolutely nothing in this definition or any of the actions that we're undertaking that curtails free speech. In fact, it's vitally important that all of us uphold free speech. Indeed, some of the people who are extremists want to close down free debate in order to advance their agenda. This definition is only about access to government money and to government platforms.
Fewer middle-aged people are dying from cancer than at any point in the last 25 years, though researchers are warning that cases are still on the rise. Deaths among 35 to 69-year-olds are down because of better screening and treatment and fewer people smoking. However, studies show a concerning increase in cancer diagnosis, particularly in prostate and breast cancer. Experts say it's largely due to lifestyle factors, including obesity, alcohol consumption and others. With better intervention, they say around 37,000 cases could be prevented over the next 16 or so years. China's foreign ministry has criticised a new plan in the US to force the owner of TikTok to sell the social media app. The bill, which passed with bipartisan support yesterday, aims to address concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the algorithm that's behind the video app, which is used by some 170 million people in the US alone. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry described the plan as unfair. TikTok CEO Shuzi Chu says it will reduce competition.
This legislation, if signed into law, will lead to a ban of TikTok in the United States. Even the bill sponsors admit that that's their goal. This bill gives more power to a handful of other social media companies. It will also take billions of dollars out of the pockets of creators and small businesses. It will put more than 300,000 American jobs at risk, and it will take away your TikTok.
Back here in the UK, Diane Abbott has accused both major political parties of failing to tackle racism. Writing in The Guardian today, the Independent MP has criticised the Commons Speaker after she wasn't called to speak in Parliament yesterday. It left Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to debate comments made about her. Miss Abbott's now warning that the Conservatives will play the race card ruthlessly, she says, at the next general election. But she's also taken aim at her former party, Labour, describing Sir Keir Starmer's position as disappointing. It's after the Prime Minister faced calls to return a £10 million donation that was made by the Conservatives' biggest donor, Frank Hester, after comments he made about Miss Abbott were widely seen as racist. Well, a large fire has forced residents to flee a high-rise block of flats in Edinburgh. Around 70 firefighters with 12 fire engines and specialist resources have been battling the blaze since the early hours of this morning. We understand that other emergency services are still on the scene, providing support and assistance to those who've had their homes affected by that fire. The Defence Secretary is urging Donald Trump not to cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the US presidential election. Speaking exclusively to GB News in Poland as he watched UK troops take part in a NATO exercise, Grant Shapps warned the former president that it would be cheaper in the long term to back Ukraine. Britain has just announced a new deal to buy 14 American helicopters. Mr Shapps told GB News that more needs to be done to spend on defence.
Actually do have more money than ever before. Nonetheless, I think it is very important, given the pressures the world's under, that we make sure that our adversaries understand we're serious, and that does mean, I'm afraid, spending more money. In Poland here, they're spending 4% of GDP on their defence.
And finally, gardeners tackling slugs and snails are apparently being urged to make peace with the slippery garden grubs. The Royal Horticultural Society is partnering with the Wildlife Trust to change the perception of the bugs. They've long been seen as gardeners' worst enemies due to their appetite for chomping through the leaves of prized blooms in your back garden. But experts say that out of 150 species, only a small few pose any threats to the garden. They say they're actually an essential part of our ecosystem, feeding on rotting plants and recycling nutrients back into the soil. Who knew? For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. But now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
What's the time? It is 7 minutes past 11. Here's Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, do you think there should be an age limit on mortgages? Well, Halifax seem to think so. They're imposing a 70-year age limit on thousands of home buyers in a move to rein in risky lending.
This is going to affect people who are 45 or 50 if they want a 25-year mortgage. This is pretty bad news. Outrageous or a savvy move from the bank? Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, has all the details. He's in our Westminster studio. Liam, am I right? A lot of people now... I bought my first house, very lucky, when I was 21. These days, people are lucky if they can afford to buy a house sometimes when they're 35, 40. So this age limit could be problematic.
I agree. I was surprised when I saw this from the Halifax. You know, the Halifax tends to has a reputation. It was obviously founded as a mutual rather than a bank, a building society back in the day. It has a reputation for being very customer friendly, a bit less hard-nosed, if you like, than many other commercial lenders. But I agree with you, Andrew. When you have so many youngsters struggling to get on the housing ladder, an age limit on a mortgage does, you know, put the squeeze on. I mean, back in the mid-90s, when I bought my first property, without sounding smug about it, 25 to 34-year-olds, 60% of them owned their own homes. Now 25 to 34-year-olds, it's well under 30%. So a huge swathe now of the UK population at that crucial family-forming age when you get together, you settle down, you have kids. They're not owning their own home. They're in rental accommodation. A lot of them are still living with their parents. It's no wonder our fertility is falling, Andrew. It's no wonder the UK's indigenous, if you like, population is failing to grow because so few kids, a big part of it, so few young adults are able to take the natural step, which for you and me was very natural. We weren't from flashy, wealthy backgrounds, were we, Andrew? Yet it was natural that we would own our own home. That is the British dream. And yet, if you look across the numbers now, the UK population, home ownership in this country is below the average of all the European Union countries combined. So we're not any longer a nation of homeowners the way we were. Home ownership is very high among people aged 60 plus. There are more homes now in the UK that are owned outright with no mortgage than are owned with a mortgage. And people tend to own homes with mortgages when they're younger, of course, because it takes 25 years plus to pay off your mortgage under most circumstances. So it did surprise me that the Halifax had done this. I'm sure they've got good financial reasons.
Why,
but
though,
it does
Liam?
seem to just turn the screw a little bit more on that, you know, what we call generation rent. You know, many young people, even with professional jobs, two young people with degrees and working really hard, really struggling to get on the housing ladder in many, many parts of the country now. This is not just London and the South East.
Why, Liam? What's their logic? We've got to use our imagination in situations like this. Where does this go? Why are Halifax doing this? Because I imagine they're going to be the first of many.
I can only put it down to they must think that there's some kind of financial risk to this. That's the only reason I can come up with. I don't have an insight into their thinking in particular, but looking from the outside, Bev, I think that must be the reason. But look, it strikes me that home ownership, housing as a whole, is the great It's the dog that hasn't yet barked in British politics. You know, the media talks endlessly about identity politics. The media talks endlessly about foreign policy and wars and so on. And, you know, political gossip and, you know, all these things are important. I'm not denigrating that at all. And, you know, I cover some of that kind of stuff myself. But for so many ordinary people, it's all about, you know, the cost of living. It's all about your housing. Can my kids get a house? Can they buy a house? Can they rent a house? Can they get a social housing from a housing association or a local authority, a council house? We're not really focusing enough on these big issues, in my view, particularly housing. You know, ask people under 35 what really matters to them in politics, and they might talk about the environment. They might talk about other issues of social justice, but they will almost certainly talk about housing. And it strikes me that the government of all colours haven't focused on this enough. And it strikes me also that the Halifax, they've made this decision. They seem to be the first to put their head above the parapet. You know, with the best will in the world, I've got a lot of respect for the Halifax. They may get some sort of pushback on this.
OK, all right, thank you, Liam Halligan. A Halifax spokesman has said these changes have been made as part of a regular review of our lending criteria and will ensure we can continue to lend responsibly to a broad range of customers.
It's another attack on older people, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's also about the fact that there are big funds, big wealth funds and banks are buying houses and then renting them back.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. 2030, you'll owe nothing, you'll be happy. And unfortunately, I don't think people will be happy.
And it's so different, honestly. When I bought my house when I was 21, 22, I mean, the house cost me £19,000.
I know.
And you could borrow
tragic.
2.5 times your income, and I had to take a lodger.
Yeah.
But I was able to get my foot on the ladder really young and kept it on that ladder.
Yeah.
Very lucky, very, very lucky.
It doesn't happen now. And what does that mean? That means you have a generation of young people who feel hopeless. And that is the generation who is sat at home and not going to work. And we talk about them a lot.
We do. Now, still to come, Michael Gove, the Community Secretary. We didn't think it was coming today, but apparently he is going to name his shame the groups that the government have decided are extremists. He's going to name them in the Commons, and we'll bring you that live.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine. Like, that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:16, you're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Bev Turner was talking at the time.
We're all talking. We're all talking.
Our new guest, Jonathan.
Jonathan, who's with us the second time, and Karen Malone. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Right,
Yeah.
before we come to you two, we've got to listen from Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. He spoke to GB News exclusively. He urged Donald Trump not to cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the next election. Here he is.
Well, look, I think it's undeniably a more dangerous world. We've got a war in Europe, we've got a conflict in the Middle East. You've seen the UK involved in the Middle East with the Houthis. So I think it's important that we up our spending. We are committed to 2.5%. I note that Labour say they're committed to the 2% figure. That's already a £7 billion cut from where we're up to now. So they are not the answer. And as you say, I've rightly, I think, called for more money. I should just say that this budget actually has added 1.8% in real terms to our defence budgets.
Obviously, Putin has been gaining ground in Ukraine. How much of a threat currently is Russia? And could you see the UK and other NATO countries being forced into some kind of armed conflict?
So I was over in Ukraine last week. I met President Zelensky. When I was there, I said this is a wake-up call for the world. You've got some Russian advances, as you say. They're not dramatic in truth, but nonetheless, they're consistent at the moment. It is very important and will cost us a lot less money if we understand that defeating Russia and Putin in Ukraine is a lot less expensive than him moving further to the west, either to the rest of Ukraine or worse still, to places like Poland.
So that was Grant Shapps talking exclusively to GB News. Jonathan, do you think that the public appetite is still to keep funding Ukraine? I don't see what the solution is. They're not going to beat Putin, are they? Where does it go?
Well, just before we get on to that, I think it's Grant Shapps should be clear that it's not currently 2.5% at the moment.
No, it isn't.
It is 2%, and it's an aspiration to get to 2.5%. So it's a bit cheeky to criticise Labour for wanting to be 2%. I think it's about
because that's what the
Conservatives are.
It's 2.27.
So look, the fundamental point is, well, first of all, to address your question about Ukraine, I do, in a short answer, I do think it's important to keep funding Ukraine because Ukraine is the front line against Putin, and I don't think that we can just swallow the Kremlin line that they'll be satisfied if they just meet all their objectives in Ukraine and they won't have any other objectives anywhere else in Europe. I don't think that the Estonians are happy with that, or
but
the
do you
Lithuanians.
think the public are with you on that?
I haven't seen. I haven't seen the polling data, but I genuinely think that the British people believe in fairness and that they were horrified by the invasion. I don't see what necessarily has changed. I think if you were to ask people about individual sums of money, people might quibble with how much they're prepared to send Ukraine, but the fact is that we haven't actually sent as much to Ukraine as other people, and there are different ways of supporting Ukraine. But the fundamental point, Bev, in relation to increasing military budget, whether you support that or not, is the Conservatives are just not being honest with how they're going to fund all this stuff, because it's so great, isn't it, to be able to cut taxes at the same time promise increase in funding to all manner of public services and departments, but we know that's not how it works. If the Conservatives want to keep funding the NHS, keep funding schools and increase the military budget, they can't afford tax cuts, particularly not the £46 billion of unfunded tax cuts they're promising.
They're not increasing defence spending, sadly, and I wish they were.
Well, they're promising to right now.
Yeah.
So how are they going to pay?
Well, they had a budget and there was not a penny extra for defence.
Yeah, but I'm watching Shapps and what he's saying there. It's totally disingenuous. Why didn't he say all this before the budget? Well, not a single penny was allocated in the budget to defence, and even despite all the polls where people said they would rather have money spent on defence than on tax reduction. So it's a bit disingenuous of him to say, because what he's done is he's watched the public's fury at the fact that nothing's been given to defence, and he's now sounding like he's the great I am, saying, yes, well, we should have more. It is shocking that, while the worst war is raging in Europe, Ukraine, since 1945, we spend just 1/50th of our total national income on defence. That's what the 2.27 is. It is astonishing. We have a military and army that's down to 76,000. We're mothballing fighter squadrons and fighter jets because...
Don't even start on the aircraft carriers.
Well, the aircraft, all of that stuff. And yet it seems to me that this government is not taking the threat of Putin very seriously. You know, before the last war, Churchill warned of exactly this in the early 30s. He was saying we didn't have enough weapons to fight a war. The difference between then and now is the weapons they were building then could be built quite quickly. The weapons they're going to build now are going to take a lot longer. So if something happens quickly, we are just not equipped. The government, remember, the other week had to deny that conscription would be brought back if we were attacked by people because we just didn't have the military to fight a war, which I think is astonishing, and they had to deny that. But who else is going to fight the war?
David Davis has proposed, the Tory MP, massively expanding the force of reservists up to 100,000. So you have weekend soldiers, effectively, so they're trained, so if there was a war, they'd at least
Very interesting. There was a poll the other day that said under 24s, something like 40 to 50% would not be prepared to fight for their country and would refuse to be conscripted.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I find astonishing. Well, I don't know, no one wants to fight, but the thing is you would. If your country was under attack, you wouldn't want your country taken over by Putin, for instance.
But this generation, they live on a globe, Carol. They don't live in a country, they live in a global world where everybody has to love each other.
Well, it sounds like bait, Bev. I'm not going to rise to it. But what I will say is that when we talk about who these sort of hypothetical wars, we need to be really careful about saying who are we going to be fighting these wars against, because nobody on either left or right is talking about engaging Russian forces in direct combat.
No, but hang on, you can't just say. Today, it's reported in the papers that Putin has said he is ready to use his nuclear weapons. So it's not us saying we're going to attack him. It's him saying he's very happy to attack the West if we try to interfere with Ukraine.
Obviously, that's what he's saying.
Well, you've got to take it seriously.
Of course we have to take what he says seriously. I'm not saying we shouldn't take it seriously. What I am saying is that we can sort of war game all kinds of scenarios, but fundamentally, I do not think that we are going to be engaging in a kind of nuclear war with Russia, because that really would be mutually assured destruction.
No, I don't think we are, but that's what the nuclear deterrent is all about, isn't it? That you don't engage in the war. That's what it exists for. And for the people who now say, don't up defence because we won't have that kind of hand-to-hand war anymore, look at Ukraine. It's hand-to-hand.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening there.
12 billion by the end of this year would have sent to Ukraine.
And we can't fix our potholes unless you're a 101-year-old woman being told to do it yourself. Should we talk about the Diana Memorial event? Prince of Wales, Duke of Sussex, Carol, at a ceremony tonight, and they can't even have William in the room while a video of Harry is played on a screen. Why? Because I guess he maybe not be able to put his face straight and smile nicely for the crowd.
Don't you think it's disrespectful to Diana?
It sort of is yes, it is disrespectful to Diana. I'm sure Harry would have wanted to come here. And I'm sure he would, because, you know, we know from his people that that he'd be willing, he has said he'd be willing to take on some royal duties again. And this would have been the perfect royal duty to ease him back. But the palace said they didn't want him here. Wills, I'm pretty sure, has said, I'm not even going to be, you know, in the same, you know, hemisphere. But so it is a bit respectful to Diana, but if William, you know, the future king, is saying, I'm not having him, and you can understand why. Yeah. He can't be expected to forget.
But he was only he could have been on a video link at the same time. They could have done that. That's not such a big ask.
It's not such a big ask, but the thing is, we haven't been hurt in the way William has. We haven't been hurt. William is angry with him for the hurt he's inflicted on him, but probably mainly because of the hurt he's inflicted on Kate. Yes, but I would think Wills doesn't think of him as his brother anymore. I would think Wills thinks he's gone to him now. He's just...
That's quite a statement.
Quite sad.
Do you not think?
I think probably right.
We can see them as royal figures, but then also you see them as just siblings.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's...
And siblings.
I don't know what they think about each other, apart from what they've said on the record, obviously, and William said a lot less than Harry about it. But I think that if Diana would have been very, very upset by it, and so I think that has to be taken into account. And also, there's the more pragmatic issue about what's happening in the royal family right now. If you have the king out of action, for goodness knows how long, you have a really depleted royal family. It feels a bit as though the wheels are sort of coming off the show, and they need all the star power they can get. With the greatest respect to Edward and Anne, they are not A-listers in the public view. And
You
the royal
say
family, the whole
that.
point is they have to be seen to be believed. I know, Carol,
You
that
say
they're
that,
decent
but-
people, but they're
Yeah, they
not
are, but-
what the public wants.
Edward is a decent person. And in fact, I've seen him on telly a few times in the past couple of weeks. He's a really good bloke. He's a decent bloke. And he doesn't seem to suffer from not being able to
but
talk to
Jonathan,
people.
he doesn't have the star
No, he
power
doesn't.
that Harry used to have.
Yeah, but we can't have Harry back
No.
after what he's done.
And we were saying, Andrew and I were saying, Zara Phillips on the front page
she's
of the
great,
paper
isn't
she? Yeah, she is great.
Racing,
But she's not a working
fantastic.
royal. She's never been on the civil list.
Olympic
was-
silver
Maybe she
medalist.
should-
She was
Brilliant.
brought up playing Miss Zara Phillips, and that was why Princess Anne
More
always
Zara.
intended it.
Yeah.
Their brother too. They were almost brought up as commoners.
Yeah. They need a matriarch, Carol, to knock their heads together. Who is that? I'm surprised.
Carol Malone.
Well, no,
I'm
the
sure you did
matriarch.
a good job.
Well, no, but the
They needed an
matriarch.
indomitable matriarch.
The
Carol,
matriarch was
step forward.
Kate, wasn't it? That was the point. She had
She
become.
didn't do it. She's not really strong enough character.
Do you not
is she?
think? I think
No.
she was becoming that in the sense that she was certainly the most popular royal. That is not was. Is the most popular royal, the most loved royal.
Can Camilla not step into the bridge?
No, Camilla's great, but as you say, she's a bit like Edward in that sense.
Yeah.
Princess Anne. I do love Anne. I do love Anne. I do. I'm not sure the world's ready for Anne.
Oh, she'd be a fantastic princess.
Oh, she'd be like the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But shouldn't she be the one? Shouldn't she be the one behind the scenes saying, "Right, Harry, William, I want you in this room on this day. I'm going to get. We've got to sort this out for the family."
She should be.
I think the royal family I've often said this about the royal family. They need to be wise. They need to have good politics.
Yeah.
If you have a star power who actually wants to come back onto the show.
No, I'm sorry.
You know,
No, you can't.
If he wants to come and it can be resolved, if you can let bygones be bygones.
Resolved.
Actually.
But this event...
I'm not in the family, Carol. I'm just saying that pragmatically, constitutionally, that's what I'm talking about.
But to go back to this event tonight, it's shameful, actually, that they haven't sorted this out. So William does his stuff, and then the moment he's off the stage, his brother beams in. What does it say to the world?
Well, it says to the world that they're not speaking and probably never will. But it would also say to the world, if they did do what you suggested, where, you know, what kind of the video thing to get William was there, it would show on his face. So what would that say to the world?
You've got to put
probably
on a
worse
show.
message.
Look at the people the Queen had to meet. Must have been pretty distasteful when
I
she
get
met
it.
some of those people who are former IRA terrorists.
The Queen never had to deal with what Harry has inflicted on the royal family.
Maybe what they need, Carol, is a dog.
Yes, good. That's a good segue, Bev.
Go on. What will a dog do for them? If we could just get a dog, health benefits
so
for dogs.
My paper, the Express today, said dogs do really make you feel much happier. They raise your concentration levels, your levels of well-being. This is a study that's just been done, and with a 4-year-old trained poodle, where lots of people was spend time with it, and it just changed their actual brain waves. Now, you know, having spent time with my dog,
your lovely dogs.
It changes your brainwave for sure.
I love your dog.
Turns you into a bit of a
mush.
Mush, yes.
Yeah.
Does it really?
Yeah,
Maybe that's where I'm going. We need to bring a dog in the studio every day.
I've got 2 cats, but I mean, I would love a dog, but it would be divorce for me. What about you, a dog?
I always wanted a dog, sadly, never had one. And now people say they're a bit like children in the sense that they do completely upend your life, and you do lose a lot of freedom. And I do quite enjoy I do quite enjoy my freedom. But I can completely understand. This is a really interesting story. It kind of confirms what we already know. When I'm around dogs, I always feel a lot happier and sort of less stressed. I just love them. I mean, they're not the scary dogs, not an XL bully, but you know.
Oh, I'm terrified. I couldn't even really look at that picture of the dog with his tongue hanging out and his big teeth. It makes me go very scared.
Oh no, dogs are. You know, dogs bring things out in you that you didn't know you had. Yeah. They bring feelings out.
Carol's husband has never seen you being so nice.
Yeah, well,
you're so much nicer to your dog than you are to your husband.
I say every day to my dog, twice a day, I love you. I'm not entirely sure I say that twice a day.
Say that to your husband.
Probably not twice a day.
If you were to have a dog, Jonathan, what dog would you have?
Probably a golden retriever.
I love Labradors.
They shed a lot of hair, though.
What, Labradors?
Yes, you always have to be hoovering the carpet.
Right, yeah.
We've got a Tibetan Terrier. No, they don't shed any hair.
Murphy.
Look, Murphy.
Hello,
Murphy.
Now,
and bring a little pug into the studio.
Yeah. Now, still to come, the government is going to come up with the new definition of extremism and name some of the groups they've decided are extremists. Michael Gove will name and shame any minute now in the Commons. Before that, though, Sam Francis with your headlines.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. I'm a fan of beagles, if anyone's asking. It's just gone 11:30. The headlines this half hour. The Community Secretary says the government's new definition of extremism won't stop people protesting or hurt free speech. Michael Gove says the new wording is instead intended to stop groups which promote violence, hatred or intolerance from getting state funding. It comes nearly 2 weeks after the Prime Minister warned that extremist forces were, he said, trying to tear the country apart. However, church leaders, including the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, have warned that the definition could create more division. A boy has admitted killing 15-year-old Eliane Andam near a school in Croydon. She was stabbed to death after meeting friends on her way to school in September. The 17-year-old suspect, who we can't identify because of his age, has pleaded guilty to manslaughter but denies murdering her. Prosecutors, though, haven't accepted that plea and he will go on trial later this year. Diane Abbott has accused both major political parties of failing to tackle racism. Writing in The Guardian today, the Independent MP criticised Commons Speaker after she wasn't called to speak in Parliament yesterday. It left Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to debate comments made about her. It's after the Prime Minister faced calls to return a £10 million donation made by the Conservative Party's biggest donor after comments that Frank Hester made about Miss Abbott were widely seen to be racist. And the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex are set to attend an awards ceremony in honour of their late mother, Princess Diana. Prince William will make an appearance in person at the Diana Legacy Awards this evening. However, it's reported the brothers won't cross paths, with Prince Harry joining via video call only after William has left the ceremony. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, has been crowned Britain's favourite royal in a survey conducted before the recent photo editing controversy. Those are the headlines. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2813 and €1.1712. The price of gold is currently £1,694.16 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,768 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Emily and Tom are here with us in the studio. What have you got coming up on the show this morning, guys?
Oh, there's plot, intrigue and rumour. Not only is, of course, the major story about extremism, could you be labelled an extremist? We'll get into that in a second.
I think we all could, eh?
Yeah. These rumours of cabinet ministers meeting, secret meetings, about a contingency plan to remove the Prime Minister.
Oh.
We're going to be looking into the details about this. It's been reported in Bloomberg, it's been reported in The Telegraph that there are contingency plans being made by senior people around the cabinet table about the most extraordinary idea of a sixth Prime Minister since 2016.
I'm on board.
They have to coalesce around one candidate.
Well, this is the big problem, and this is what people writing about it have raised. Some cabinet ministers have anonymously been saying if there was one candidate people could unite around,
but there isn't.
Rishi would be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there isn't, and ultimately this is what kept Boris Johnson in position for perhaps a year longer than those first initial conversations about removing him.
And of course, if he was still in the Commons, he'd be the obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with this extremism definition stuff, a number of Muslim groups have come out to say this is a solution looking for a problem. Ergo, there is no problem with extremism among the Muslim community, and that is just ludicrous, because there clearly is.
Of course there is.
It's not to say all Muslims.
No,
but there are some, and it's important for Muslim groups to define that.
And it's interesting we hear now that Gove is going to name these groups today, because we were told they wasn't going to name them for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Any minute now, that is going to happen.
Any minute now.
We have to wrap it up there, but Emily and Tom will be on, of course, from 12 till 3 with Good Afternoon Britain. Don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
our woke army, a topic we talk about almost every day on this show. And now the decision to allow women to join frontline army fighting has been described as a failed exercise in political correctness, because government figures reveal that only 15 female recruits completed basic training for either infantry or tank units between January and September of 2023. A senior army officer says women are put off joining frontline units amid numerous allegations of rape and sexual discrimination. Well, joining me now is former NATO commander and Royal Navy officer Rear Admiral Chris Parry, CBE. Chris, always a pleasure to see you on the show. So here we are again, we're talking about diversity targets, and it seems that no matter how much they huff and they puff, young women simply aren't joining up.
Well, I mean, the life's not for everybody, Martin. It's not even for most men, to tell you the truth. This is a tough life, and it's a life that is geared towards the sort of physical and mental, I hesitate to say skills, but aptitudes that men have. You know, the idea that men and women are interchangeable in all these roles is ridiculous. What we need to have is all roles open to both men and women, and those that are suitable and have the aptitude for those jobs should be going into them. If we've got 15 women who are going into the infantry and the armoured corps, then that's fine. They're the ones that are suitable. It's as simple as that. Any idea that we should have quotas or any sort of percentage of people from certain ethnic groups or from women is ridiculous. We want the best people who serve our country and can defend it.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:38 with Britain's News on GB News, Andrew Pearson bedtime. We're going to go live to Westminster now because we're expecting Michael Gove, the Communities Minister, to name and shame the groups that he says are extremists in the Commons. Political editor Chris Hope is in our Westminster studio. Chris, I thought initially he wasn't going to name and shame the groups today. That was coming in a week or two. Why are they bringing it forward?
Well, we think that's happening. And morning, Andrew. Morning, Bev. The suggestion is, from sources, that he will try and name some groups. Of course, the full list will be prepared over the next couple of weeks, and that will be produced and then published by the James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, and Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, and that will cause a big row, because when you're trying to define who or what is extremist with this new definition, there'll be some people around the edges where there's a big debate, and I think that will be a contested space, and then have the debate. Now, the government has, in these new plans set out today, made very clear the final decision will lie with the Community Secretary and the Home Secretary, and then it's up to the groups named, if they want to contest that, to go to judicial review in the High Court, costing lots of money. There are concerns about this from people on the free speech side. Toby Young from the Free Speech Union, he's worried that any future government, Andrew and Bev, maybe not this one, but a future government could use this extremism definition to stifle freedom of speech and to cut down and stop people being critical of the government. What it's meant to do is to give guidance to central government and other bodies not to give public money to groups named as extremists, but it could get and may well get pretty political and controversial very quickly when that full list is published. What we're waiting for now is to hear Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, who earlier in this very chair was setting out the plans for GB News viewers just after 9 a.m. in the morning. He'll be setting out what he plans to do, and there is suggestions he could use parliamentary privilege to name groups. What he won't want to do is to get ahead of the official list when it's published in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So we'll wait and see what he says.
OK, thank you, Chris. Christopher Hope there in Westminster. We are waiting to hear if Michael Gove will give those list of extremist groups. We're also hoping this morning, obviously somebody like Michael Gove comes along with a big story, it slightly throws us into disarray. We do want to get to the Pothole story as well, but we're also going to be talking to a gentleman. He's a delivery driver who basically goes around while he's delivering his things and he cleans street signs just from the good of his heart.
What a sweetheart.
I know. I love people. I love British people who do that sort of thing. We shouldn't have to clean our own
And on
signs,
potholes,
but anyway.
Keith says, because he's down in Somerset where the 101-year-old lady is, our roads and pavements here in Somerset have deteriorated to third world standards due to a complete lack of maintenance by government, both national and it's a national disgrace. And Susan says, despite increasing council tax again, in Ashford in Surrey, we are pitted with potholes, particularly in front of shops. We and our OAP friends have written endless letters, met with councillors, to no avail.
And Diana, I'm so glad you've reminded me of this. I've noticed this. The area she lives in, she says Wandsworth, not a million miles from me, know that when a pothole is filled, great, around 2 months later, it's back again. Incompetent in capital letters. I conclude the guys employed to do the job just don't know what they're doing or they're too lazy to do a decent job. That is so true.
Or do they do a bad job deliberately so they know they're going to get called back to do it again?
No, whatever it is, nobody's managing it. And I've exactly the same. There's a road that I drive in here. Road works for months. Cones all along, down to one lane. Oh, look, they're fixing a pothole. That's good. 2 weeks later, traffic cone has gone and the potholes are back.
Yeah. There's some of the potholes near me, they're like, well, you could fall into it. You could fall into it.
Yeah. Right, don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Lots more to come.
Morning, here's your latest weather for GB News from the Met Office. More rain to come as we go through today, but at least it is going to be pretty mild before a showery day for tomorrow. Like I said though, plenty of rain around today, a band pushing its way northwards into parts of Scotland, across Northern Ireland, and some of that rain could turn heavy, even a little bit of winteriness, some sleet or snow over the highest ground. Across more eastern parts of England, it's actually going to be largely fine, some decent sunshine through much of the day, but cloud and outbreaks of showery rain feeding up from the southwest on some brisk, blustery winds. Like I said, though, on the mild side, temperatures are well above average for the time of year for most of us, though a little bit chillier towards the north. More rain to come as we go through the end of the day, particularly across parts of Scotland, but it does start to push away as we go into tomorrow. There will be some clear skies around tonight, but also further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could really pack a punch. There could be the occasional downpour. Temperatures, though, not dropping a huge amount because of the blustery winds and the generally mild theme to things, many places staying in double figures overnight. As we go through Friday itself, then a largely showery and blustery day for many of us. Watch out as some of those showers could be heavy, possibly even thundery, particularly towards the south and southeast of the UK. Signs of something a little bit drier pushing in from the west, but for many it is going to be a largely showery picture. Temperatures still well above average for the time of year, so highs of around 16, possibly 17 Celsius. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Well, a delivery driver has been held a local hero because on his rounds he cleans and repaints neglected street signs that he sees on his travels. Bobby Burden Brewer spruces up these dirty street signs in Dorset. So they go from this, if you're watching on the radio, we've got a sign looking pretty tatty, to this. How lovely is that?
Honestly,
transformation.
Joining us now is delivery driver, street sign cleaner and general all-round hero, in my opinion, Bobby Burden Brewer. Good morning, Bobby. Thank you so much for joining us.
You all right?
Yeah,
Morning.
great. So just tell us how it all started. What was the first sign you cleaned up?
That was when I lived in Barnstable, you know, and sort of right in the town centre there. It was okay, but on the immediate outside of the town centre, the signs were just really bad. So it was, Vicarage Lawn, I think, was the first one I went for. Obviously, I was a bit nervous, you know, thought, well, should I really be doing it? But then, hey, who else is going to do it?
So what do you take with you? Do you take a mop or a bucket? And how do you clean them?
Well, it depends, really. I mean, you've got that sort of green stuff that builds up on the metal if it's not been cleaned for a long time. So if that needs doing, then, yeah, a bucket with some water in the back of the car there. But most of the ones that I do, they just need sort of paint straight on, really. And I use the outside metal paint, the special stuff that's obviously quite expensive, you know.
And what's the response like, Bobby, from the locals and also from the councils? Because you're doing the most amazing job and you're shaming these councils for not doing this job themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not talking since COVID, really, of that excuse. These have not been done for literally years, you know, and it's sad. We're talking about civic pride, you know, English civic pride, you know, and it is time we started, you know, like doing up our streets a bit and taking care of them, you know, just like blocked drains and things. I mean, we're really tired of it, but especially in Shaftesbury, the response has been absolutely incredible on social media. After I did the Heathfields Road sign, that was just incredible, over 1,000 likes. Had a meeting with the Shaftesbury Town Council this morning, and that went really, really well. So they'll be getting me on board there. They say they can pay for the materials I paint, but they won't be able to pay me for the signs for doing work because it's not their signs. It belongs to Dorset Council.
And are you documenting the signs on social media? Is that how awareness has risen about what you're doing?
That's right. Yeah, I use like you know, the Facebook pages sort of around Gillingham or Shaftesbury and around there, and it's these great sort of pages that everyone is connected to, you know. So I mean, just that Sandylands Road one, doing that in East Stour yesterday, because it's not just those two villages, but also the areas around, you see. And I see those when I'm going out on the routes, you see, and I say, oh, there's another one that needs doing. And yeah, they said, thank you for doing this in our beautiful village, you know, of East Stour. And yeah, really, you know, it's just like, you know, these.
Do you think, Bobby, it may encourage other people to take up their mops and do the same?
Yeah, a couple of people have actually come forward saying, how do I do this then? So really, all you need is the special paint, you know, and a steady hand, and yeah, let's do it. But I mean, someone's got to do it, you know.
Yeah.
It's civic pride, you know.
They should give you the freedom of Dorset, Bobby.
Oh, I'd love that. One guy, he was saying he deserves an MBE or
you do?
You do.
Knighthood. Yeah, that would be really cool.
I mean, I think a knighthood's pushing it a bit, Bobby. I can't lie. I mean, you've only just started, but let's see if you can get around the country, and we would absolutely follow your travels to do it.
Yeah, there's a few signs near me in North London, Bobby, if you want to come to the capital for the day.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. You know,
Well,
anywhere there's a sign, you know, just let me know and I'll come and do it.
You're doing
I'm passionate.
You're doing an amazing job,
really
Bobby. Honestly, best of British, Bobby Burden Brewer there, who is going around.
Hero.
And do you know why it matters? Because pride in our streets has gone.
You see, and it means litter bins overflowing.
Yeah.
He is great. We need
Love it.
more of him. And he does deserve an MBE, because that's what the honest system should be about, not rewarding politicians
100%.
and wealthy businessmen, people who do... he's an unsung hero, isn't he?
Let's go to Christopher Hope. We're waiting for Michael Gove, of course, to name and shame extremists in the Commons any minute now. Chris?
Yeah, there's been delay, as there often is in the House of Commons. He's due up in about 10 minutes' time, which may miss the back end of your brilliant show, Andrew and Bev, but we are waiting to hear from Michael Gove. The speculation he'll use privilege in Parliament, which means he can't be prosecuted or challenged for saying things from the dispatch box, to name some groups who could fall into this new extremism definition. We do know that other groups are already lining up legal challenges to go to the High Court to try and ensure that if they are called extremists, they can challenge that. So we'll see how that goes. We'll be in the hands of Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, to pull this list together with their officials and produce it. There are big concerns, though, from freedom of speech groups about whether this list might be expanded, so-called mission creep, so it includes people who we don't think are extremists at all. Certainly on the Christian right, there are those who are concerned if they're fighting against abortion clinics, will they be called extremists? And I think there's a tradition, isn't it, in the UK of freedom of speech and protesting, and anything which eats into that, those freedoms will be a problem for many fair-minded Brits. So I think it's a very delicate space that Michael Gove is treading into, and we'll be due to hear from him shortly, in about midday on the hour, I expect, in the House of Commons. We'll bring it to you first when he speaks on GB News.
That's Chris Hope, who will be there and bring it to you live as Michael Gove. And interesting that he will use parliamentary privilege, because they may be cross about it, some of the groups he names, but they can sue for all they like.
Will.
He's got absolute parliamentary privilege to name and shame them without any legal recourse.
I mean, if they genuinely are extremists, they tend to get quite cross quite easily, so I can understand why he's doing that.
And the genuine extremists should be named and shamed.
Let's have a final word from you guys at home on potholes. Matt has said, regarding the potholes, the roads are so bad now, yet we spend thousands of pounds on making our car roadworthy, and yet the roads are unworthy to travel on without hitting a pothole and then damaging your car.
And here's a message from Diana, which I know is going to resonate with, I suspect, millions of you, and it certainly does with me. Local councils should stop spending so much money on unused cycle lanes, stupid, smiling or grimacing faces and 20-mile-an-hour speed cameras. Let's not even get started on the ultra-low emission zone.
Well, Christine has said, thank you, Christine, for getting in touch. I bet if there were potholes outside Number 10 or Buckingham Palace, they would repair them straight away. Us British people really are put to the back of the queue with everything, aren't we? Doctor's appointments, hospital appointments. We just keep giving money to other countries and providing everything for illegal immigrants.
If Keir Starmer had made a speech today about potholes rather than kids playing the recorder in schools, I guarantee he'd have got much more publicity and much more support.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
Right, we're done for this week. I'm going to be guesting on Neil Oliver's show over the weekend. Now, though, that is it from Britain's Newsroom. Here's Emily and Tom.
See you next week.
And we'll be bringing you the words of Michael Gove live as we learn which groups are to be added to the extremism list, who will be precluded from interactions with the government. We'll learn that from midday.
Yes, we will indeed. And also, could there be a very real plot to oust Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister? Apparently, Cabinet Ministers are meeting to talk about who could take on the role instead. Could there be some kind of mutiny brewing in the corridors of power? We'll find out from those who know. All of that after your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. May have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
That warm